It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. Our number here is 201-939-4513. Jot it down. The first half hour of today's program is going to be about you folks and your calls. I know during this NFL Draft Prospect Preview time, we've got so many guests that we line up to bring you these firsthand accounts of these NFL Draft prospects that a lot of you guys don't get a chance to chime in. But we're going to try to do that today, at least for the first half hour, before we talk to Softy Mailer from KJR Radio out in Seattle, and he will address the Washington Huskies. And, of course, they've got a slew of prospects in this year's draft. That'll be coming up at the top of the hour. But for the first half hour, your chance to call us at 201-939-4513. I'm Paul Dottino. He's two-time Super Bowl champ Jonathan Casillas. And I've got to tell you something, Jonathan. The one thing about what's happening now, we're in a little bit of a dead period for the news. You've got the pro days going on. You've got the visits to the local teams that are going on. And, you and I, in all the years that we've, known each other and worked together, whatever, we've never really talked about what that was like compared to now. Because pro days now, they're even putting them on TV.
Yeah. I
mean, they're live. You're getting them either on NFL Plus, you're getting them on ESPNU. The pro days are now a circus. I don't know. Did you have a pro day when you were at Wisconsin?
Yeah. We had a pro day. I was hurt, so I couldn't do the combine or the pro day. I got invited to the combine, was only able to do bench press and interviews. But, of course it wasn't cameras there. It wasn't no media there. If there was media there, the cameras weren't on. Because I'm pretty sure there was media there, but the cameras weren't on. And like you said, it's a circus, but that's how it is now. Everything's recorded nowadays. Social media is a paramount, I think, in publicity and PR stuff for every organization. I think, that goes for the colleges to the NFLs. And, it is what it is. Everything's on video nowadays. And, you got to be, I think now you can't really get away with anything anymore. I think back in the day you could get away with some stuff like, like back when we was, they probably still doing it now, but they got to be a little bit more finesse about it. But I remember like pro day, I was a little lighter than I was at the combine. Okay. So I just put a little 5-pound plate.
Did you?
Down my
Did
pants.
you really?
Because I played, I think my senior year, like maybe 224. And then combine, I was like 230, but I was just smashing waters. Okay. Just like trying to be as big as possible. Because I know I wasn't going to run. I know I wasn't doing anything. So I went to weigh in heavy. And then pro day, I was about 225, 224. So I just slipped a little 5-pound weight. Like, I don't know if they can get that off now. Camera's going to be on them all the time.
You know what? I wouldn't put it past them. You never could tell. You
can't tell. Just a little in the tights, and underneath the shorts.
How about that? Well, I've heard legendary stories from scouts who would say they would go to a school's pro day and they would only find after the pro day was over, some guys were very leery about the 40 times. And I know some guys who actually went back to the field, remeasured the field, and found out that the school had relined the field.
Like 38.
Yes.
38 yards.
Yes. Yeah. They had cheated. The school had helped their group of pro day players cheat by shortening the 40 by just a tad.
And you know what they do too as well, Paul? They do like, and this is like high level right here. So maybe they keep it at 40. But what they do is...
How about the slope? Have you heard that one?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
What I'm talking about is a little bit more of, I don't know. They put like a wooden like plank down, and then they put like turf over the plank, so it's more of a harder surface. Oh. So it's almost like you're running on a street instead of a soft, absorbent surface like turf and grass is. So like that'll get you maybe like 100th of a second off. Hey, but everything matters, That kid just ran a 4.23, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, He made himself some money running that time.
Well, they call that home field advantage.
I like it. Hey, Listen, man. Do what you can do to help me look better. I'll
That's
take
it.
that.
That's it, and so there were so many of these stories over the years, and I'm sure it is harder to cheat now because technology has kind of taken over, and you can't really fool the technology as easily. But it's the gamesmanship. It's funny because what do they always say about coaches and athletes? If you can get an edge, you'll try.
Of course. I remember when I was coming out, one of my teammates, his name was Elijah Hodge. His brother, Abdul Hodge, he played at Iowa, then he went on to play at Green Bay. And I remember when I was like coming out, I was like, yo, like I need to know like the ins and outs, man. Like, how could I finesse? He was like, no, don't finesse. No, I'm not. I'm not saying that I'm trying to cheat, but I need to know like the things I can and can't do that they not telling me, that my agent's not telling me. Because I know there's some things I can get away with or do to help me get this playbook, to get going. Like,
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm talking about. He thought I was trying to cheat or like trying to maneuver my way around working hard. No, I'm going to work. Right. But like, let me know what the edge is. Like, let me figure out how to get that edge that everybody's not telling me.
Edge and you would know. Could be two different things.
Right. That like you would know because you've been in the game. You've played a couple years, I believe, at the time for the Packers. So you understand that there's some things that you can and can't do, and I want to know the things I can do to help myself get that edge, like you said.
Yeah. So in any event, pro days continue, and so do some of the workouts. They didn't have the local workout rule in that day, did they?
I just found that out. Is that a new thing? Like this year? Or
It's been a while for a while, but I don't think when you played that the local rule was in play.
No, I didn't know about that. I know they got the Big 12 pro day coming up, which I didn't even know was a thing.
You have a radius of X number of miles from your program, and any schools that are within that radius, you get X number of local guys who are allowed to work out for you without having to go through your count.
Understood. So this what happened to me, Paul. So when I came out, I got injured my senior year. Before my senior season, I played basically injury prone or injury rattled my senior year with a knee. And I ended up electing to get surgery because my knee got progressively worse as the year went on, right before the bowl game when we played Florida State in the Champ Sports Bowl or Wisconsin. And I got my surgery December 17th, I believe, 2008, right when I was finishing college. And I was supposedly almost could have been healthy for the combine, but I wasn't because I tweaked my hamstring. So I had a knee, and then I pulled my hamstring trying to, get a time. I haven't recorded a 40-yard dash at that point since my junior year.
Okay.
I haven't ran full speed. So pro day was only 2 weeks after the combine, so I couldn't do pro day. I couldn't run at pro day. So all I did was interviews at the combine. I got invited to the Senior Bowl, couldn't do Senior Bowl because I was hurt. My agent told me, he said, you need to do something before this draft because everybody thinks your knee is just totally messed up. My knee was fine, but I couldn't run at the time because of my hamstring. So what I did was at Parisi over here in New Jersey, because I was a New Jersey guy.
Is it Elmwood Park or Fairlawn?
Somewhere. It's up here somewhere. Bergen County, somewhere over in this area, like maybe 20, 30 minutes from here, max. And I only had like 3 or 4 scouts, but I ended up basically just trying to run and just put something out there just to let them know that I'm okay 4 days before the draft. And it was only like 3 scouts there, and I didn't run good. I didn't jump good. Like, I got the record for the 40 at Wisconsin. I ran 4.33 at 215 pounds my junior year. You're kidding me. I had 38-inch vertical, but I was hurt. I literally ran hurt. And this is how you know I was hurt. After the draft, rookie minicamp starts, a week later?
Yeah.
The guys are in.
This Giants do it 2 weeks later, but yes.
Yeah, guys are in like almost immediately after the draft, right? I couldn't even perform for rookie minicamp. I wasn't even healthy for rookie minicamp. So I ran my 40. I jumped my vertical. I did all my performances. I was still injured, but I had to show them that I was at least because they didn't know about my knee, because it was like I left the program basically. But I had a really bad, not really bad, but I had a prolonged knee injury that progressively got worse, and they really didn't know what was going on, as in the scouts and the teams. So my agent was like, you got to do something. You have to put something out there to let them know that you can at least run and do stuff. And I ran like a 4.5. I never ran 4.5 in college. I always ran 4.4 and under.
Wow.
My whole time. Like I was You got to remember, when I was here in New Jersey, I was a 3-sport all-state athlete.
Right.
Basketball, football, and track.
And I saw his basketball tape, by the way.
I was a sprinter. I was legitly fast.
Okay.
So it hurt me, I think, big time, not being able to show my athleticism and not being able to perform. But at the point, being able to do that pro day, I think helped me for at least guys to see me, that I can still move around a little bit, even being hurt. I still ran 4.5, which would probably put me in the top 5 of all linebackers in that draft.
At that time, probably did.
Yeah. And I don't know if you remember my year coming out, Aaron Curry was
Aaron Curry.
Was a linebacker. And I remember, like, Stanley Arnaud, he got drafted to the Saints in the 4th round, and I also went to the Saints as an undrafted free agent. Stanley Arnaud was a really good linebacker. Aaron Curry, when he showed up to the combine, he was like 250. He ran like a low 4.5. And when you watch him move, everybody was like, oh, yeah. Even all the linebackers, mind you, Clay Matthews is there, Brian Cushing is there. Like, this is a great – Brian Arakpo. Like, this is a great linebacker class, right? Everybody's like, oh, he's going number 1 because how he looked at pro day. And I don't know if you remember his career.
Oh, well, he had a bad knee injury, which was part of the reason why he never fulfilled his promise.
He didn't really pan out.
No.
You know? And
he comes into that bust category.
The reason why I'm saying that is because some of these pro days and these combines, it could be very off-putting to what the player really is. Because they might go out there and look like everything and run really well, test really well, jump high, do everything right, look good in the drills, and then all of a sudden you like, man, I think this guy's better than the film that he put out there. Let me tell you something. They're not better than the film. It ain't happening. You're not going to look at film and be like, oh, his workouts are better than his film. And then you be like, oh, I'm going to draft him because of his workout. And then all of a sudden you get that film again. That's the guy that shows up.
Listen up to this guy, please, folks, because I've had so many scouts over the years tell me people get too carried away with pro day. They get too carried away with the combine even. And here's a guy who went through the process, saw firsthand, and I'm glad to hear you vocalize your skepticism of how much meat that people put into these things.
Yeah, for sure. Like, look, at the end of the day, if a guy can play, he can play. That shows up on film.
Yeah.
That is 100% it shows up on film, right? Mm-hmm. The workout and all of that, the measurables and all of that stuff, even the interviews, the drill work, the line, the position-specific work, which is football stuff, which I think is important. That's secondary to the film. That's secondary. And some people, I think, they put that as a priority, almost the first thing that they look at. And it's like, that's wrong.
For years, the Raiders and Al Davis
right,
did that.
Height, weight, speed.
It was all about that.
Yep.
It was about the workouts for them, more so than the game tape.
It worked, though, for a little bit for them. They were winning back in the 70s
and then
80s.
It kind of swooned. Quick story. Many years ago, scouts told me, and they taught me this, they said they would never lessen a player's grade off of the combine or the pro day. The grade that they gave that guy at the end of the season, as far as his playing grade, not the intangibles that go into the folder, but the playing grade, that grade stays. Now, if the medicals or the interviews or the intangibles come up bad, that's a different story.
Right.
But as far as his football skills, the playing grade would never, ever be dropped off a pro day or a combine. Now, what they said to me was, what could happen, and this is the most that would ever happen, and I was told it was very rare, is that if a guy had a really good combine and a really good pro day, the scouts would go back, rewatch the game tape again to confirm something that they saw or something that they may have missed. The most that they would possibly do is maybe bump that grade up by half a point.
Yeah.
That's it. By half a point. So when you folks out there are seeing, hearing, and reading that over the course of the last 3 months, when no one has played another college football game, that a guy has jumped from the 3rd round to the 1st round, that ain't half a point, fellas.
Yeah, that ain't it.
That ain't half a point. That's a hell of a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Okay? That's the freight train running down the hype track.
Yeah.
Is what
I
that
mean,
is.
it's all a gamble too, because you look at the college film, and let's say you have a guy. I'll bring this guy up too, and he's a friend of mine still to this day. He played for the Jets for a while. He was like a top 6 pick overall. Vernon Golston. Mm-hmm. Vernon Golston had a heck of a senior year. I watched him have 4 sacks against Wisconsin.
He was supposed to be a Jets beast of a linebacker.
He destroyed us. And then he went to the combine, ran like a high 4.6. He put up the bench like 150 times. He's strong. I mean, he looked like the part, and he performed well. He got drafted very high. Mm-hmm. And then I played against him. And I went against him on special teams. And I was a guy that was, coming off an injury my rookie year and, 225 pounds max. I went against him on special teams. Paul, he wasn't nothing.
The two guys who for years were the poster child for the fake grades coming off of the combine and the workouts were Vernon Golston and Mike Mamula, defensive end for the Philadelphia Eagles.
What year was this? I was gonna say
Mamula was a pass rusher for the Eagles, a defensive end linebacker.
Jamarcus Russell. Because remember when Jamarcus Russell did the combine or the pro days, he was throwing like 80 yards on the knee. And it's like, first of all, you're never going to throw from your knee. Because you can't throw from your knee in the NFL. You're down.
Let's see. Mamula was drafted in what year? What class? 85. Yeah, First-round pick by Philadelphia in 1985. And, he was a hybrid linebacker defensive end who for his career had 31.5 sacks in 5 NFL seasons. And when he came out, he was what they called a workout warrior because he destroyed all the drills. And his overall pick was, let me find it, 7th overall.
Wow. Mike Mamula.
I've
never heard of him.
Oh, yeah. Go take a look at it. See if there's some YouTube. I don't know if there's even enough highlights to make a YouTube video of him. But he... for years, he was the poster child, and then Vernon Golston was also another one of those poster childs.
Yeah.
And it was like, don't be fooled by these guys, because you know what? The more stock you put in postseason stuff, the more likely you're going to get fooled.
And there's something into the level of competition, and I think those numbers can be deceptive, because if you're bigger, stronger, and faster than collegiate guys, you probably beat most of the guys you go against.
Yeah, but now you got to step up.
But in the NFL, if you're bigger, stronger, and faster, that might give you your edge. But there's other guys that maybe aren't fast and doesn't have long arms, but they played 10 years in the league. Why did they play 10 years in the league? Yeah, that and their technique is flawless.
And their heart.
There's a lot that goes into it.
Oh, there's a lot that goes into it.
And it's not just the physicals, which you can look at.
Exactly.
When you start looking at, because we're gonna do Washington soon, and then we're gonna bring up the draft grades, and we're gonna bring up what people say. There's nothing on there that can show us that they're a really good football player or not.
That's right.
Like that'll show us the potential, but not is he a good football player. You have to look at that. You have to see that. You have to be around it.
Yep.
That's how you prove they're a good football player. That's the extra level of intangibles that we can't do here.
Well,
we would have to be there and watching them play, talking to them people in person.
That's why during these preview shows, this is what we do. We call on the radio and the TV analysts who do these games all the time.
That got their eyes on those guys.
They see these guys every week, every play. I'd much rather hear from them about a guy than the 5 minutes of cut-up tape that I'm looking at.
Yep.
I could tell you something, but I really trust our guys who are out there in the field, and that's why we work so hard to get a good network of people to bring our previews to you. All right, we're going to go to our phone calls real quick. We only got about 10 minutes to get to these quick calls. Once again, you can find an archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at giants.com/podcast. Sorry for the detour, but I did think that was an interesting conversation because we've never had that and never on the air before. And I think it takes people a little bit inside as to what's going on at this time of year. All right, let's go to Elijah on line 2 in Ohio. You're first on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Hello.
Hey, I was wondering why – I had a question. I was wondering why nobody's talking about Tommy DeVito, which I know he's undrafted. He was
well, he's under contract.
Elijah, I'm with you too, bro. I just said that the other day.
Rookie,
I just said it the other day.
And everybody – I listened to people talk about him, and they think he's not any good. I don't quite understand, because everybody thinks Bryce Young and Will Levis are really good, and they were drafted, but they didn't have nearly, like, their season wasn't really much better than his, and he was playing behind probably one of the worst offensive lines in history.
Elijah, I can only give you this. He's under contract to the Giants for the upcoming season, so there's not a lot of questions. We know he's going to be here at training camp through the spring, through training camp, and will have the opportunity to compete for a job. That much we know, so that's probably why you don't hear a lot of conversation, because people are wondering, like, well, what's going to happen? Is he going to be re-signed? Is he going to go somewhere else? No. He's here to compete.
But I think Elijah's point is that there's, like, you said it now, but, like, Elijah, how many times have you heard since this offseason started, and I'm with you with this because I haven't heard it at all, that you said what you said just now about him, but no one else has said that. No one else is bringing him up for the Giants starting job this year at all. Nobody.
Well, I don't think to be a starter. I think he's here to compete to be a backup.
But even when we're talking about when they signed Drew Luck, right? And they're and everybody, like, this is critics, because, I gotta listen to what's going on. I'm listening to different people. I love to listen to ESPN, the analysts, and everybody that's talking Giants stuff, just to get different perspective. They're talking about, the Giants need to bring in or draft a rookie quarterback. The Giants need to bring in a veteran before they sign Drew Lock. Then they sign Drew Lock. Okay, Drew Lock's going to be the starter day one. Like, no one has brought his name up, like, at all. And I just said this like a week ago, because they were talking about Drew Lock versus somebody else if the Giants need to bring in if Daniel Jones is not healthy. No consideration for Tommy DeVito whatsoever. And I was sitting there like, why they keep playing my boy Tommy DeVito? And I think, Elijah, it's because he was undrafted, right? He doesn't have the measurables as some of these other guys, right? And if Tom Brady would have came in for Drew Bledsoe like he did, and he would have had, let's say, a sub 500 year that year, Tom Brady the next year, he wouldn't be the incumbent starter because of his draft status, because of his physical tools.
Right.
Like, he's not blowing people off the board in any type of way, but he was a winner. So that's why I think somebody like a Tom Brady got the acknowledgement, because he won. It's hard, and like you said, Elijah, Giants didn't play well this year at all on offense, like basically the entire year. You could pick apart games, but consistently the Giants offense struggled no matter who played quarterback, and the Giants had 3 quarterbacks playing for him last year, right? Tommy DeVito, I think, did a very good job for what he had. And I think he has some potential to be a good player in this league. Maybe not a starter forever, but a backup is a potential starter in the NFL. When you're a backup, second string, you're a potential starter. As we saw last year, a lot of quarterbacks went down. I think Tommy DeVito is a very capable player in this NFL, and I'm with Elijah. I don't understand why he's not getting, I think, respect that he deserved, because he put it out there last year.
Elijah, I will also say this. The angry mob out there who is frustrated and disappointed about what's happened with the Giants over the last year, they're more concerned with, got to get rid of Daniel Jones, got to draft a top 6 quarterback. They're so focused on how are they going to push Daniel Jones aside that they don't have much breath left for talking about Tommy DeVito, okay? And but hey, it is what it is, right? Because a lot of the media feeds into the angry mob syndrome. We get that. So I will say this. Tommy DeVito's under contract. If the Giants draft a developmental quarterback, he's going to have a hard time making the 53.
Yeah.
If they draft a developmental. It's going to be very hard for him to do.
But that's this 53.
For this 53 this year.
Right.
Right. If the Giants decide that they are going to draft a developmental and then try to waive him to the practice squad, I bet he gets claimed.
Yeah, because he put it on film last year that he's a capable quarterback in the NFL.
We've had that conversation before on this program, because what you're talking about has got to be about other people, because we've talked about Tommy a lot on this program.
Right, we have.
Yeah.
You have for sure, because we give him respect. Because
we also know what we're talking about.
Right, but like, I'm with him. I watch a lot of other people's opinions and perspectives about the Giants. I want to hear what other people are talking about. No one talks about Tommy DeVito.
You're right.
No one.
I believe he gets claimed. If they
Oh,
try,
yeah,
if they
for
try
sure.
to pass him through, I think he gets claimed.
For sure.
All right, thanks so much, Elijah. Appreciate it.
Good question.
201-939-4513. Wilson is on line one. We go to you next on BBKL. Hello.
Jonathan, dímelo.
Dímelo,
Bully.
papi.
What's going on?
Hey, Bully and Jonathan, I want to ask you something. Bully, the other day when I asked you, that the Giants the moves that they made, it looks like they're playing for now. They don't want to wait for the future, and Lance almost had a heart attack next year. Remember? Okay.
Yeah.
And Jonathan, I'm going to ask you, both you guys, something, because I asked this the other day, and they told me I was crazy. Why can I just say, why Brian Dable does not have to coach for his job this year? Why is this presumption that whatever happens this year, he's still a great head coach, and there's no doubt on everybody's mind that he's got to come back for the fourth year? And I said, no. I said, he's got to coach for it. If the Giants don't make the playoffs this year, and if the Giants are a dumpster fire, I don't want to see this guy again. I'm sick and tired of excuses.
Wilson, you're making a hollow point here, and the reason is because
Why
the
is that,
Maras,
Paulie?
the Tisches, and Joe Shane are the only people who matter. Nobody else
I understand
matters.
that.
So why even discuss this hypothetical, which
Because
is hollow? It's
because
hollow. It
I
means
tell you-
nothing.
I tell you why. Because I'm sick of every time people bring out, not just me, everywhere.
But don't listen to them. If
No,
it's
but
media
listen-
fodder and garbage,
No.
don't pay attention to it.
No, because I want to ask something, right? I said the other day, okay, well, he won Coach of the Year, that's fine, but yet last year he was horrendous as a head coach. He was horrendous. He was the worst head coach in the NFL. You know what I keep hearing? Well, if the Giants won two more games, like they could have won the Buffalo game and they could have won the Jets game, it would have been different. And you know what I say? They also should have lost against the Cardinals, and they should have lost against the New England Patriots.
All right, Wilson,
So
we're up against it because our guest is going to be on in a minute, so I got to let you go. But I'm going to give you a second to
I'll
respond,
respond
Jonathan,
to Wilson.
because quite frankly, to say that he was a horrible head coach last year couldn't be further from the truth. This team played hard for him despite numerous obstacles, specifically injuries at key positions, and they fought tooth and nail right down to the very last snap. So I would disagree with your assessment.
And Wilson, there's only maybe 2 or 3 head coaches that are safe in terms of if their team goes 0-17, But if the Giants are horrendous next year and they only win a couple of games, no matter who's the coach, they're going to be on the hot seat.
Yeah.
Not just from upstairs, from the fan base. Our fan base, we are aggressive. We don't have patience, So he's safe now, but if the Giants don't perform next year, no one is safe. Head coach, GM, any player on a team, success is the only thing that makes your job secure. That's the only thing. And even with that, Peyton Manning got cut at one time. Peyton Manning, the best player in the league. This league is not for long, and it's a performance-based league. And if the Giants can't figure out how to perform better, not only everyone's going to be on the hot seat. Everyone's job is up in the air. The Giants need to perform well. This is a performance-based business, and the Giants have to perform well, and I think they will.
Ultimately, regardless of the time frame, poor results will get you a walk through the door.
Yeah.
At some point in time,
For
whatever
sure.
the timetable is, if you continue to have poor results, you won't be around.
Yeah.
And that goes for everybody, except for maybe Mike Tomlin.
That's what I'm saying.
Who, of
Tomlin,
course-
Andy
who of-
Reid. This
who-
is like 2 or 3.
Of course, Tomlin never finishes under 500.
500.
So guess what? He's allowed to stay.
Right.
Oh, appreciate the phone call. 201-939-4513. It is time to get to the NFL Draft Prospect Preview portion of our program. And that means we send it out to the West Coast, specifically the Pacific Far West. And we preview the Washington Huskies with Dave Softy Miller, host at KJR Radio in Seattle, and a longtime friend of the program. Softy, Paul Dottino, Jonathan Casillas with you. So glad for you to be able to join us today.
A longtime friend. Let's not go nuts, Paul. All right? Acquaintances, right?
I know your Seahawks fans don't like me very much, but that's okay.
Quayton says, "No, we love you out here on the West Coast, man." And yeah, it's been a crazy year for football in Seattle. Pete Carroll gets fired. Kalen DeBoer takes off for Alabama after going to the national championship game. You got a guy that finished his second in the Heisman Trophy race in Michael Penix. You got a bunch of potential first-round draft picks, 13 Husky players at the Combine in Indy. So It's been quite the ride the last few months, man.
All right, my friend, so let's talk about my guy for the Giants at pick number 6. If I get to make the pick, and Joe Shane's not going to let me do that, okay? I've already been told, Dottino, keep your hands off the card, all right? So there's nothing I can do about it. But Rome Odunze is my guy at 6 unless Marvin Harrison should somehow fall to the Giants. I don't see that happening. The nitpickers will tell you, and I've asked every one of our guests who have come on to talk about one of the blue chip top 10 guys to nitpick this blue chip prospect and tell me what could possibly be wrong with him. What would be the blemishes?
Yeah.
The only thing that I could say is he doesn't have world-class speed. I get that.
Right.
And maybe he's not great coming off of the releases. But then again, how much was he pressed at Washington anyway?
Yeah, I think you're nitpicking big time.
There you go.
Which is exactly what you just said. I think if Rome Odunze played for Alabama or Florida State or Notre Dame or Ohio State or Michigan, I think he'd be the top receiver off the board. I honestly believe that, man. I mean, this guy is a stud in every sense of the word. First of all, he's a phenomenal kid. Phenomenal guy. He's without ego. He treats everybody with respect, from the head coach to the janitor. So that's number one. You're going to love working with and covering Rome if the Giants do take him. Number two, there's just nothing he can't do, right? The 50-50 ball, he's going to be aggressive. He's going to be physical. He's got hands like butter. He's going to fight for every ball and actually win almost every 50-50 battle you throw his way. If you press him, he'll be able to shuck you and run right by you. If you want to give him the ball on a reverse like they did on 4th and 1 against Washington State in the Apple Cup deep inside their own territory, he can turn the corner with any wide receiver in college football. So I just think the guy's being overlooked, and I think he's going to be a top 10 pick likely in the NFL draft, but I think even that is overlooking this guy. If he played for a school on the East Coast or in the Big Ten, I think he'd be a top 5 pick in the draft, easily.
Wow, that's a lot to say.
You don't have, by the way, Softy, you don't have to sell me, okay? You don't have to sell me. I've been talking about him as my pick at number 6 since the Combine.
Yep.
He's my guy.
Well, and look, guys, I think maybe one of the knocks on him is that he plays for a pass-happy offense, right? Like they throw the ball a lot at Washington, or they did at least when Ryan Grubb was the offensive coordinator. This guy's getting 10 targets a week, for God's sakes. And let me tell you a story about Rome Odunze, all right? Because you guys both know, and yeah, John, you know this better than I do. You got to play hurt in the NFL, right? You cannot play in the NFL unless you're willing to suck it up and play hurt. So we go to Arizona. I think it's week 4 or 5 of the season. Rome Odunze punctures a lung against Arizona. Can't fly home because the doctors won't let him fly. So his mom and some trainers took turns driving him from Tucson to Seattle, and luckily the Huskies had a bye that week. The next week was the Oregon game, where he went bananas on the Oregon Ducks, number 7 team in the country, I believe at the time, had the game-winning touchdown, where he fought for a ball that was thrown over a cornerback's head, and he wins the game with a punctured lung. 2 weeks later, after puncturing his lung, this guy is on the field ripping apart the Oregon Duck defense. So if you want a guy who's going to play hurt, if you want a guy who's going to suck it up and be physical with a punctured friggin' lung, Rome Odunze's your man.
Did we sell you?
I like it. Softy, you sold me on him. But just like Paul was, and Paul's, he's a layup guy. He's not going to slam it home when I say that. Because the NFL is going to be a lot more critical than Paul. They're going to look at his film, and they're not going to say anything positive about him. They're going to look at all of his negatives, right? So one thing that I can see from him, and it might be a positive thing to some people, but I think it doesn't translate well in the NFL, is his ability to create space. Like a Devontae Adams, like a Keenan Allen. And I say Keenan Allen because I think they're very similar, guys that aren't the Blazers of the world. Decent route runners. Keenan Allen, elite route runner, but he creates space. Rome Odunze, he does catch a lot of contested passes. And I would say a lot of GM scouts and coaches will argue that he doesn't create enough space for them. I think that's my only critical argument, because he does have a high contested catch rate, and I think one of the reasons why is because he doesn't create enough space. And in the NFL, you need to create space. I think that's my only knock on him, and I'm sure the scouts all over the NFL would say a little bit more than that, but that's my only critical statement against him. And I don't know how well that translates over to the NFL.
Yeah, look, and I get it. When you're about to invest, a top 10 pick in somebody, maybe even as high as number 6, and you're going to put your career on the line in some ways as a GM or a head coach in a 23-year-old kid, you want to go over everything with a fine-tooth comb, and I totally get that. But I saw Rome Odunze lose plenty of defenders in college. Plenty, okay? So I don't think that's as big a concern as some people are making it out to be. Maybe it's not his strength, but if you were to call that a weakness of his, then the weakness is still pretty damn strong, all right? I mean, somebody's got to have a weakness. Somebody's got to have a strength. But how weak is your weakness? Is it terrible? Is it average? Is it above average? I think Rome Odunze is still very much above average at creating space and losing defenders. And I do think that when he gets into a situation where he's not creating the space that you're talking about, he makes up for it with incredible strength and incredible hands. So I'm just not concerned about the guy. I don't have any concerns about Rome Odunze at the next level. And, guys, I got to tell you, as a dude who's been covering Washington football for 30 years, I'm normally over-the-top critical of Washington players because I've seen all of them, and I know what they can do and what they can't do, and I don't want them to embarrass anybody in the NFL. In this situation, I think Rome Odunze is as slam dunk a wide receiver in the NFL as I've ever seen. Now, I don't know if the Giants are the right spot for him, to be totally honest with you, because I have no idea who's going to be throwing the guy the football. A place like Kansas City, for example, would be unbelievable for him. Playing indoors in a place like Minnesota would be great, but again, they have no quarterback. I just think that Rome Odunze is as big a lock to have a long 10-plus year career in the NFL as any Washington receiver I've ever seen. And that goes back to Reggie Williams, guys. Reggie Williams was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, but he was kind of a meathead, had kind of a pothead problem. He doesn't have that issue. Rome Odunze is a guy that you would let every daughter in your family date and feel no concern about it whatsoever.
And I don't want to leave this left unsaid, Softy. He's not afraid to use his frame to block either.
No, not at all. He's an incredible blocker. Guys, go back and look at I'm telling you, the Wazoo game, the Washington State game, the Oregon State game, when they needed a quick first down, they went to Rome Odunze on the sideline, lost his defender. You want to look at a guy creating space? Go look at that play against Oregon State that won the game for Washington, and you tell me if he can't lose players.
All right, before we get to Michael Penix
Get me
Jr.
all worked up here, John.
Oh, I love it,
like
Softy. It's early in the morning out there. Are you sure you're okay now? Before we get to Michael Penix Jr., because there's a lot of people here who want to talk about quarterbacks. I get that.
Right.
I just want to ask you about Jalen Polk, because he is the other spectacular receiver that Washington has, who will be gone by the end of day 2. I don't think there's much doubt about that. In a deep wide receiver class, how do you rate him based on what you've seen out there with the Huskies?
Well, I would actually, honestly, I would take McMillan over Polk. They got 3 of them. They got Odunze, they got Jalen McMillan, and they got Jalen Polk. The issue with McMillan, if you look at his numbers aren't going to jump off the page this year because he was banged up for a long time and missed almost 2 months of football. All right, he twisted his knee against Michigan State, and from that point on, he never really was the same kind of guy. Go back and look at the Texas game that McMillan had in the Sugar Bowl. Go look at the Pac-12 championship that McMillan had against Oregon. So his numbers aren't going to be there because he missed a bunch of time, but he is the most, I think, complete route runner on the Washington football team. He may not have the physical skills that Rome Odunze has, but he can really run every route in the route tree. He's probably a day 2, if not an early day 3 guy, round 3 guy. Jalen Polk is also sensational. I mean, Jalen Polk is a guy who's going to find a way to get open subtly. Kind of reminds me in some ways of Steve Largent for all the old guys like me and Paul that remember that name from 50 years ago. He's not going to be flashy, but he's going to find a way slippery and sneaky to get open, and he's not going to be a guy that's going to have the drops. He had about a 2-week stretch last year where he could not catch a football, and it shocked everybody. Oregon State in the rain had a hard time catching the ball. Wazoo had a hard time catching the ball. And then all of a sudden, the Husky coaching staff pulled him aside, and they put on a tape of him making incredible catches and said, look, dude, this is who you are. And he went out against the Oregon Ducks, and he was sensational in the biggest game of the year, the Pac-12
Great
championship.
game that was.
So, for me, McMillan's number 2 and Polk is number 3.
Wow.
But out of Polk and McMillan, when you look at these guys, because I haven't really seen them. Of course, I've watched Odunze on.
Yeah, you're on the East Coast. You guys don't
film.
watch West Coast football out there. I get it.
Are they? Would you consider these guys physical guys? Because as Paul knows, I'm always trying to see if they can fit into special teams, you know, and not just like as a returner because they play wide receiver. I'm talking about gunner. I'm talking about running down on kickoff plays, and now kickoff now is going to be back. I think back in, you know, intertwined back into the NFL. It's kind of been done away with the last few years, and kickoff, you know, it's a huge field position deal. And wide receivers that may get picked up later in these rounds, they have to do well on special teams. What do you think about them when you think of their physicality and their mindset in terms of special teams?
I think Rome is in a league by himself.
Not him.
When it comes to
not Rome. He's not playing special teams. He's
you're
not playing special teams. I'm not talking about him.
I'm just telling you that you could use him as a punt returner. Washington did use Rome Odunze in a pinch as a punt returner. He's got that in his game. Now, if you're drafting him number 6, you're not doing that, obviously, in the NFL. I'm just telling you that from a physical perspective, Rome is in a category by himself. And then I would say McMillan, and then I would say Jalen Polk. I mean, I would have no problem using McMillan as a gunner on special teams. Polk's frame may not be built for that in the National Football League. He may have to put on some more weight.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the big guy because there's a lot of hype about Michael Penix Jr. Now, Softy, let me just come right out and say this. Forget about watching any tape on him. The 4 season-ending injuries for me before he even gets into the NFL draft, that for me is automatically a huge, huge no-no. And aside from even watching him, I know he's got the best cannon of any quarterback in this class. I understand that. But that injury file, I'm sorry, I cannot digest that. So let's put that aside because there'll be some people who are willing to ignore it, others like me who are going to say that means he can't be on the shelf for me. Talk about what you see from him positively and negatively as a performer aside from the injury concern.
Well, I mean, first of all, you can't say something like that and expect me to ignore it. Okay, you can't just throw out the, you know, he's off the board for me. You can't throw that out there and then just think I'm going to shut up and move on to the next topic. Okay,
get him, Softy, get him.
Paulie, it's been a major, major topic of conversation up here in Seattle, and I just think this. I think he just got done starting 28 games in a row. He played 2 months in a row with a bruised rib. All right, he can play hurt in the NFL. There's no issue with this guy. The days of being concerned about the knees and him getting over all that, I think are over. Did you see his vertical leap at the Pro Day in Seattle, for God's sakes? You tell me if the guy's got knee problems with that vertical leap. You saw his 40-yard dash. You tell me if there's problems with that knee structurally. So I'm not concerned about it whatsoever. And what's going to happen, Paul, is there's going to be a GM out there who's going to think just like you, all right? And they're going to pass on Michael Penix. So Michael Penix is going to fall in the draft to a place like Seattle, for example, who already has 2 tackles, a ready-made wide receiver core, a ready-made running back core, and they're going to let Michael Penix sit for a year behind a guy like Geno Smith, who was with you guys for a while, obviously, and has now resurrected himself in Seattle. And he's going to learn how to play in the NFL, and by the time it comes to play Michael Penix, he's going to be put in a position where he's not going to have to do everything because the entire offense is going to be set around him. If you put Michael Penix in a situation where the offensive line stinks and the wide receivers stink, and there's no running game whatsoever, and you do to him what Justin Fields did to Chicago, of course he's going to have a hard time in the NFL. But if you do to him what the Seahawks did to Russell Wilson in 2012, when they had the league's highest-paid offensive line, and they had Marshawn Lynch and Michael Robinson and Golden Tate and Doug Baldwin and Sidney Rice, and they had Zach Miller at tight end, and you put him in that situation where you let him sit behind an offense that is good to go and he's not having to do everything himself, this guy is going to have massive success in the NFL. I'm telling you. Now, to the arm. A lot of people look at arm strength and they see arm strength based on how far a guy can throw a ball. And that's part of it. And this guy can throw it 60 yards, no problem. What I'm looking at is a guy who can get a ball across the field to a spot the size of a
laser beam.
Frisbee.
He throws a laser beam.
Seconds.
I know.
Within seconds, all right? His accuracy is unbelievable. And if you're concerned about him stepping away from pressure, if you're sitting here, Paul, living in some kind of world where the Giants won't be able to protect him, I would implore you, go watch the Sugar Bowl. Go watch the game he had against Devondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, and the way he stepped away from pressure in that game was a master class in how to elude pressure from some pretty damn good defensive linemen. If you're concerned about that, go watch the Sugar Bowl, and then you call me, and then we'll have that conversation about whether or not Michael Penix can step away from pressure.
Pearson, my poor producer, actually thinks you're serious. No, it's okay. He and I go back a long way.
It's driving me nuts out here.
Softy, here's the thing, though. Like you just said a couple of moments ago, you were outlining conditions and circumstances that would certainly be conducive to him becoming the player that you want him to be. And I get that. But see, here's the problem. If you're going to use a high first-round pick on him, and you don't have the conditions in place that will make it conducive for him, as you said,
then don't take him.
It's a problem. You can't take him. You can't.
Then don't take him. That's fine. Unless you're willing to let the guy sit while you restructure your offensive line.
Yeah, and that could take 2 to 3 years for some teams, and maybe longer.
I think, Softy Paul, I think him not being drafted early is going to help him. I think the situation, the scenario you presented, Softy, will be great for any of these quarterbacks. But the truth of the matter is, Caleb Williams, he's getting drafted number 1 overall. He doesn't have that luxury. He is going to play right away. And,
but Caleb Williams is a different player. He's a different player than Michael Penix.
Yeah, but still, though, it's still an adjustment from the college level to the pro level. I don't care what you look like in college. It's just a different level. These guys, like the guys that you guys played against on a consistent basis, 1 or 2 of those guys are 10-year veterans. 1 or 2 of those. That's it.
No question.
You're going to go against 10-year veterans on a consistent basis in the NFL. And I think the scenario that you presented, that would be optimistic for any quarterback. Honestly, any player, but it doesn't happen like that, you know?
Okay, let me just jump in here for a second, okay? Because now I'm getting all worked up now, okay? So
I like it.
Here's the thing. There are quarterbacks who can handle that because of their athleticism. Michael Penix can run, but Michael Penix is not Caleb Williams, and his body is not built like Caleb Williams.
Right.
I saw Caleb Williams play in person in L.A. In November in the Washington USC game, and I was absolutely blown away by Caleb Williams. I mean, bringing him down to the ground is nearly impossible. So there's going to be teams that won't be able to protect their quarterback as much as other teams will, and then there's going to be quarterbacks that will be able to get out of pressure and break tackles. Michael Penix cannot break tackles, but he can evade pressure. There's a difference. Caleb Williams can break tackles. Caleb Williams can have a guy wrapped around him like a freaking hot dog bun, and he can find a way to get away from that. So I think Caleb Williams is maybe a better fit for a place like Chicago than he is a place like Seattle. But I just think this in the end, guys. If you're looking for elite NFL arm talent, if you're looking for leadership, if you're looking for a guy who can play hurt, and he proved he can play hurt, no question about that, Michael Penix is your man. If you're concerned about the injury history from 3-4 years ago from Indiana, when the guy has started 28 games in a row, if that's got you worked up, then forget it. But I think those days are over for Michael Penix. I really do.
First of all, this guy is so impressive. Like, I watched him. I watched the game. I watched highlights, and then I watched.
I thought you were talking about me.
Like a cut-up. You're very impressive too, Softy. I love this conversation.
I was like, thanks, man.
But what Paul is saying, he's not talking about him playing hurt. He's talking about the injury history. And I told Paul, because we've had conversations about injuries plenty of times on this show, and I think there are just some people that are just going to get hurt or injured. And I think some people, like more than other people. Like Rondé Barber, he played 17 years, barely got injured. Ray Lewis played, 20 years, barely got injured. I played 9 years, I was injured every single year. You know what I mean? Like, there's people that are just going to be hurt. And I think Paul is kind of in that same category. It's like he might be one of those guys. So Paul's out. And I think he's not alone. There's other GMs, head coaches, scouts, and managers that are like, we don't even have Penix on our board. So the scenario you presented, I think, is perfect for him. But this is my only knock on him, because when you get to the NFL, these corners are a lot quicker, they're a lot faster. Their technique is impeccable at this level. Timing is a number one priority, I think, for most of these quarterbacks that are in systems that he doesn't have to create outside the pocket. Penix's feet is a little bit sloppy, just a little bit. I see sometimes he's throwing these quick passes and his feet are not set. Mm-hmm. And that could be a big problem on the next level, Softy. What do you have against that?
Nothing against that. I think that you're talking about an imperfect product that needs to develop. And I think that there's a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL that will have knocks on them. I don't think there's anybody coming into the draft right now where you can say there's nothing wrong with this guy whatsoever. Everything is perfect. And if you're telling me that his footwork is what he needs to work on, that can be corrected, right? I mean, if you're telling me that a guy has no arm strength whatsoever, I mean, that's not going to fix itself. You either have it or you don't. Yep. But if you're telling me that your biggest problem with Michael Penix is his footwork, hey, get me a coordinator, get me a quarterback.
I'm with you. That is my only problem I have with him. That's it.
Be done.
He's amazing.
I guess I would also just say this about the injury history. And I get it. There's people that will freak out about that. How many games in a row would the guy have to start before you say the injury history is no longer valid? I mean, it sounds like
it only comes up when he gets hurt. That's it. Yeah. When let's say he plays 5 years in the league and something happens to him, knock on wood, I hope nothing ever happens to that kid. But let's say something happened to him 5 years down the road, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, he had 4 injuries in college to the same knee. Like, totally that's going to come. I know it is unfair. I agree with you.
Hopefully he gives you 5 years before he gets hurt.
Yeah.
You just don't know. Yeah. Hey, Softy, before you go, I want to ask you about two of the offensive linemen in particular, because we were just talking about that. Rosengarten and then obviously Furtanu way up top. Give me a capsule on these two guys, because let's not kid ourselves. Penix benefited a lot from an offensive line that was like a brick wall.
No question he did. And that brick wall, actually, Scotty Huff, who was there was only one coach that Kalen DeBoer kept from Jimmy Lake's staff when Jimmy got fired when they went 4-8. And that was Scott Huff, who was their offensive line coach. Imagine that. The offense was a friggin' mess under Jimmy Lake in his last year, and the only guy that Kalen kept was the offensive line coach, and now Scott Huff is coaching the Seahawks offensive line, by the way, along with Ryan Grubb. So offensive line, tremendous, no question about it. Troy Fautanu can play left tackle and left guard. He played left guard for a while when Jackson Kirkland was here at left tackle. Then when Jackson got hurt, they put him at left tackle, and he stayed there forever. He's just a completely polished product at left tackle. I mean, this guy is a Pro Bowl potential, all-pro caliber left tackle for 10, 15 years in the National Football League. I mean, he doesn't get hurt, right? He never whines, never moans, never complains. You never hear his name called ever because he never gives up a sack, rarely gets called for a penalty. If I'm looking for a left tackle, Troy Fautanu, maybe right in the middle of the draft, middle of the first round, would be absolutely a guy that I would target. And then Roger Rosengarten is a guy that started as a redshirt freshman last year at right tackle. You don't see a lot of offensive linemen start as freshmen or redshirt freshmen in college football. And when they do, they normally start on the interior at center or guard. This guy was starting at right tackle as a 19-year-old kid, as a redshirt freshman last year. And if you watch the Reese's Senior Bowl workouts, he never gave up a sack when he was down there. I mean, he was absolutely a star of the show at that game. He's also a phenomenal guy. Look, all these dudes are phenomenal guys. Every Washington player that played for Kalen DeBoer, they're all going to be guys of high character, so I'm not concerned about any of them getting in trouble. But Rosengarten at right tackle and Fautanu at left tackle, absolutely, to me, reek of guys that can have long 10-plus years in the NFL.
Softy, we've got 1 more minute left. I'm going to go off the board for a second and ask you about Drew Lock. We know what happened with Geno Smith, turned his career around 180 degrees in Seattle. Drew Lock had a great game against the Philadelphia Eagles last year when he finally got a chance to play.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't.
He didn't?
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. No. Go back and look at where he was before that fourth quarter. He was having a horrible game.
Well, we never got to see the whole game out here. That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, just go look at the box
What-
score, man. I mean, he was doing.
What should we know? All right, so what should we know about Drew Lock real quick before we let you go?
He's just a career backup. That's all he is, and that's fine. I mean, every team needs a backup quarterback, right? And Drew Lock, I think, is maybe above average when it comes to backup quarterbacks in the National Football League. But if you're looking for a star to replace Daniel Jones, Daniel Jones gets hurt, Lock steps in, Wally Pips Daniel Jones and becomes Luke Perry. Forget it. That's not going to happen. There's a reason why the Seahawks let this guy go on a 1-year, $5 million deal. Okay, it's just not anything to even be thinking about. I mean, Drew Lock is going to be a backup quarterback for the rest of his career, and that's it. That's all, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Softy, always appreciate the time, my friend. Dave Softy Miller, host of KJR Radio out in Seattle. A longtime friend and a good associate of the program. Jonathan, what else do you want to say to this man?
I mean, I wanted to ask him about Bralen Trice. And
go ahead,
we have
quick.
30 seconds. I don't know if that's enough time for you, Softy. Give me something about Bralen Trice.
Bralen started off a little slow last year and then really picked it up as the year went on. He didn't have a lot of help last year at the defensive end position or even the pass rush position. He was really the only big-time pass rusher on the Husky football team last year. So he was facing a lot of double teams, at least early in the year. And then Zion Tupuola-Fatui kind of got going a little bit later in the year. They started bringing some heat from their back end. But Bralen Trice, kind of reminds me of Joe Tryon, who's now at Tampa Bay, where he really popped and had the one good year and then kind of rode that to, a first-round pick in the NFL draft. I don't know if Bralen Trice is a first-round pick, probably a second-round pick, if not an early third-round pick. But he's a guy that's got some quicks. He's not as fast as the great elite edge rushers out there. But if you're looking for a guy who can maybe win the 50-50 battle every now and then, great. But if you're looking for a guy who's going to be getting home and just beating tackles to death in the NFL, that's probably not your dude. I'm kind of curious where he plays in the NFL. Is he an outside linebacker? Is he a hand on the ground, 4-3, defensive end? I'm curious to know where they put him in the at the next level, but he's a guy that really came into the league, his last year with a ton of hype and had a hard time meeting it for the first couple months and then really blew up at the end of the year. It kind of got closer. So I like him, but not enough to take him in the first round.
Softy, we'll talk again during the season. We got to find out where the schedule makers have the Giants coming back out to Seattle. It seems as though that's been a regular occurrence in recent years. And then I get to tick off your Seahawks listeners when we do our chat. Always good to talk to you, man.
Paul comes on the air and tells the Seahawks fans how the Hawks have no shot when the Giants get smoked, and he has to come back on the air and apologize.
Softy, stay well, okay?
Nice meeting you, Softy.
Okay, boys, see ya.
Be good, my man. Dave Softy Miller, KJR Radio out in Seattle. I've known that man
awesome.
a long time.
He was awesome.
Us energized people, we travel in packs.
Yeah.
Okay?
He was awesome.
He's one of my guys.
He was awesome.
All right, folks. That'll do it for this edition of the program. Do I have to read a spot here, Pearson? No spots? You know what? We just had so much with Softy. I just want to remind you, catch an archive of this show and our entire podcast network on Giants.com/podcasts and all of your podcast platforms everywhere. For Jonathan Casillas, I'm Paul Dottino. We'll catch you next time on Big Blue Kickoff Live. So long.